Welcome to A Dose of Feel Good. I'm your host, Whitney Bischoff, and today we are talking about if you are fighting in silence, small dose, shared light. You can see full show notes at doseoffeelgood.my.canva.site. Now, let's dive into today's episode. Welcome back to another episode of Dose of Feel Good. We are at episode 44 and quickly approaching almost our 1-year anniversary here in a few months, which is crazy that we are already almost at 1 year. We'll be close to wrapping up this series that is based on our stickers over on our Etsy shop. So speaking of, we're going to jump into another one of those today. So our topic today is if you are fighting in silence, small dose, shared light. And we're going to talk about a variety of things here today, but a lot of it's going to be about showing up for ourselves when we're struggling, showing up for each other, and just the power of really what that looks like in those moments. And I know y'all have probably heard a quote like this or similar to this, but I hear this often, that, we're all fighting battles that the rest of the world knows nothing about. And I know, at least for myself, I am definitely one of those people that I would say prefers sometimes to fight those battles in silence, and I think a lot of us are similar in that way. But why is it that we don't share when we're struggling, or that we choose to fight those things in silence? And I think a lot of that comes because there's this stigma almost that we feel, whether it's perceived or the reality, that we carry around when we're struggling, this shame almost. And it almost comes from this belief, or a place of belief, that people will maybe think less of us, or if we share maybe what we're struggling with, that it's going to destroy whatever image that we have, whatever that looks like. So we carry around this shame that, if I let people see who I actually am or what I actually struggle with, that maybe they'll see us differently, or whatever that looks like. So we walk around constructing these false narratives that, if I share or I choose not to share because I feel like a burden, or I don't want what I'm feeling to be a burden on somebody else. Or if I share, they're going to know what the ugliness actually looks like of what I'm struggling with. Or I don't want it to be too much because it feels like too much for me. Or, I think sometimes, there's all of the things that I'm trying to navigate, and it feels like this constant. And so I don't want it to be another thing and another thing and another thing. So we choose to just not share any of it, so that we don't, or aren't those people that constantly just have things that are happening. So we hold and bottle all of that in, coming from that shame, whether it's one of those pieces, whether it's all of those pieces. But we fight those battles in silence because we just feel like what we're going through is too much to share, because oftentimes those things that we are struggling with, they're big, they're heavy, they're a lot. And so it feels like a lot to kind of unload on somebody else sometimes. And so we create, this narrative almost that it's going to change the way people look at us, almost in a negative way, which is wild, because I think, at least from my experience, the truth is actually quite the opposite. When we choose to open up, others remind us of our strength. I think when we make it through those battles that we're fighting, and sometimes it's a long-term battle, and we have glimpses of light throughout there, but when we choose to share that and open up and, not fight so much in silence, but choose instead to share in those moments, others remind us of our strength, that sometimes it takes us making it through that entire journey before we can really recognize the strength or change that maybe false narrative to what's actually happening. But they share with us that, that strength that we might not be able to see. And so when we choose to open up, not fight so much in silence, and instead choose to show up and share with those around us, it really actually builds our image, and people get to see what it took for us to get here. When we are not only sharing, this is what I've struggled with, but a lot of the times when we're having those conversations, we're also sharing, and this is what I did to get through that, or this is what I'm currently doing to help with that. Or sometimes it's even just brainstorming with others, but it shows us that we can actually do it and make it through. And a lot of the times other people help us to remind ourselves that we can get through those moments. So when we choose to bring it more into this shared light, then we have those reminders. We don't have to figure it all out or even construct that narrative ourselves, because we often are our own biggest critics. And so when we're fighting in silence, we tend to move to that negative space, and we don't give ourselves enough credit, even when we fought a lot of those battles. And we're the only ones who really know all of the battles that we've faced and have gone through. But when we choose to start sharing some of those moments, then other people can remind us of those strengths as well. And I think when we choose to really share that light, it brings those glimpses of light out that we might be hiding a little bit. And I think looking at this a little bit from an analogy of, thinking of a tunnel, like an actual tunnel where there's all these boulders blocking the light. We might see this sliver of light coming through, where when we start to share maybe what we're going through, those boulders start to move and more of that light seeps through, so we can see fully what we're either navigating through in that moment or what we're working towards. And I think that's a really beautiful way to look at that when we're sharing, those boulders are moving, and either it's giving us glimpses in those moments that are still difficult. We're still navigating those in a difficult moment, but it also gives us that there is light that we're working towards at the end of that journey as well. And I think that's a really great way to look at that. So at least for me, I think this can be shown in a variety of ways. I actually was talking with somebody the other day, and again, I work in suicide prevention, which can be a very difficult field to work in. But I do find a lot of joy in my work as well, because I get to talk a lot about the everyday actions that people can take, and the hope that you can give folks that really helps people to choose to stay, even if it's just for one day. And we count that as a win. Anyways, but in my work a lot, I talk about my own experience, and I know I've mentioned it on the podcast that I'm an attempt survivor, and it took me a long time to even say that out loud, again, talking from a place of shame. And the whole point of this episode is fighting in silence. And I did that for a long time. And when I was talking with my friend the other day, they asked, how often do you mention your experience or talk about your experience? And they were mentioning, that I bring a lot of light and pizzazz into the room. And I think that's true. I tend to have this bright, shiny face and persona about myself. And I think on one side, I never want to walk into a room and bring down the energy. Hence Dose of Feel Good podcast. I want people to feel good in spaces that I'm in. But I think sometimes that almost has worked against me, because, I do still struggle. And so admitting that struggle can be hard, because when we're talking about that image, I sometimes struggle with navigating, how do you share in a vulnerable space of what you're actually navigating in those moments, while still, not bringing down that energy, and what that balance looks like. So I think it's definitely a skill I'm still working on, especially because life can be messy. And I feel like it's always something, always something that's coming in, hitting me in the face. But really moving, at least for me, to choosing intentionally to not fight in silence and moving to really finding what shared light looks like for me. And for me, it's really acts of generosity. And when I am feeling like I'm fighting in silence, I move to that direction. So I'm somebody that I will reach out to people. I will give compliments to people on the street, random strangers. And for me, it's the power of showing up. It's showing up in my life. It's showing up for random people. Because I think when I'm struggling most, I just want someone to notice without me necessarily needing to ask. And so when I choose to move to a space of shared light, it's really giving others what I want, and it comes back tenfold. And I think that's what we're talking about here, is that it might not always be like I'm going to share everything with everyone, but it is just like the small things that we do where we're sharing and even giving light to others so that we're not having to fight or feel like we're fighting our battles alone. And I think the impact of this is that when we choose to fight in silence, or what I've experienced when I fight in silence, it gives more and more power to our struggle. It's almost like a power generator that the silence just feeds more and more into the struggle. And so we dig deeper and deeper into that. Where when we shift that mindset, when we shift how we're approaching what we're fighting, rather than bringing it from silence, when we choose to bring it into the light, we limit its control over us. We limit continuing to give it power. So when we choose to give it a little bit of light, then it starts to have less control over us. I think that hardest part is starting with opening up. That is definitely the hardest step, but especially when it's had so much power over us and that silence has continued to fuel it so much, it gets harder and harder to open up. But once we do, we feel that power diminish. We feel it go down. And so we have to start with choosing to show up for ourselves. We have to choose ourselves every day. And when we do that, that breaks the silence. That first piece, that first intentionality that I'm going to show up for me, I'm going to choose me first, even when I'm really struggling, even when it's hard to do so. That is that first step. And what that looks like for everybody is going to be different. I know choosing me right now is giving myself grace. It's giving myself the opportunity and reminder to put myself first and what I want first, and not being scared to do that. I think then it's showing up authentically. That's also moving up into that shared light. Not being scared of, that false narrative of, oh, if I share this, then someone's going to think differently of me. And I've really gotten to the space of like, that's a them problem. That's not a me problem at all. And what I found more often is that is truly a false narrative that I've constructed. That when I choose to start sharing in the light, especially with people that I genuinely trust and, want the best for me, it makes the silence less loud, and they give you those compliments of how strong you are, those reminders, but it really starts with the baby steps, and really I think of shared light as a web. It's not necessarily one person that I'm going to unload every single thing that feels messy in my life, but it's finding a variety of people. And when we're talking about shared light, it's really this network of support and connections, and really showing up for myself, showing up for the people that are part of that shared light. And that really starts to feel like I'm not fighting in silence, and hopefully they're not fighting in silence anymore as well. We really have that shared light, those shared experiences. And I think there's a lot of power in that. So what does this look like in practice? a handful of pieces for our call to action. So first, and I mentioned this, first is choosing you. And part of that is reframing that false narrative that we've constructed, that if I say X, Y, Z, then this might be the reaction and doomsday reaction. And that's just really not the reality. We are not a burden if we choose to move out of that silence. Instead, really thinking of all of the positives that can come out of there. And that takes intentionality. It takes really thinking through that false narrative that we've constructed and choosing ourselves first. And I think the hardest part is, how do we open up? How do we open up to someone else? And I think practice opening up to yourself, whether that's journaling. I'm an out loud processor, so I'm somebody who will drive around in my car and just process out loud. But putting words to that silence that you're fighting and that you're struggling through, but do that maybe for yourself first. And how does that feel comfortable? How does that change the narrative? How do you feel when you do that? And then take small baby steps. Do it slowly, experiment a little bit, give kind of tidbits. You don't have to, share your whole life story. Pick your safe people and watch what happens when you start to bring some of those pieces into the light. And create that web. Identify not just one person. Who are those people of support? Find what it looks like to share light. You'll find they'll likely, maybe be fighting some things in silence as well, and they'll share those things with you. And choose to continue to show up for yourself and show up for that web that you've created. And it really creates this domino effect that not only are you not fighting in silence anymore, you're not giving power to that, but the people, that web of support you've connected to, also are no longer fighting in silence. And so when we talk about the ripple effect, when we talk about, how does this go beyond just ourselves, there really is a lot of power in that. And that's shared light. We're reducing the power that it has and our struggles have over ourselves, and we're going to navigate all of that together, which is really beautiful. So, with that, we're going to wrap up our episode here today. So, again, if you need reminders to choose you, to share the light, to be intentional about no longer fighting your battles in silence, we do have our stickers over on the Etsy shop. Love for you to share. Again, we never really know what someone's going through, and this could just be what someone needs. So share this episode if someone needs a little pick-me-up this week. Otherwise, stay tuned for next week, and enjoy your week. Thank you so much for listening, and I hope you are feeling ready to conquer the week and let your impact ripple out to the world around you. Let's connect on Instagram and Threads at Dose of Feel Good Podcast. If you're loving the podcast, I'd love it if you'd hit that subscribe button and leave a review. Until next time, share your own dose of feel good and never underestimate the power of positivity.